Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Although I haven't posted any of the videos yet, I am cracking on in the background with the progress report videos from the chosen few list. I have made a mistake. I decided to do everything in the ordinary pots in a video. Well, it ended up as two shorter ones. But in amongst there was a couple of Dendrobiums, and I've now decided that for the future videos all the Dendrobiums can just go in one part so that they're all together, irrespective of whether they're mounted, potted or what have you. So some things will get shuffled around when we get to revisit this sort of project. So I am cracking on, and this will be the Dendrobiums part 2. Minus a couple that got snuck into part 1 by mistake. Okay, let's get going. Alright, so this is Dendrobium alexandrae, and this represents the Latoria types. I wouldn't say it's my best one, but it's certainly not my worst. And I've picked on it because it's about to bloom for the first time. So, and those buds, that really does look interesting. I am, really impatiently waiting for those buds to open. First of all, these are large buds for a start and have got a very interesting pattern on them. Plus, obviously the sepals are going to be green, or at least they're going to be green on the outside. Now, as far as this plant's concerned, it was bought as a relatively young plant. This was its first strong new growth, and the growth from this previous season is this one up here. So it's grown a much better growth this time. But it seems to be like a lot of Latorias. It doesn't bloom immediately on the growths as they mature. It seems to wait a portion of a season. I won't say a whole season, but they don't seem to bloom immediately. This one's blooming on the previous year. Well, I'll say year, it's not really a year with these, but on the previous growth, not the latest growth. So what seems to be the pattern with these is it pushes up new growth or growths, they push on and mature, and as they mature it blooms on the previous set. Now, if that set is a large number of pseudobulbs, then you're going to get a mass blooming. But at the moment, I'm growing one growth at a time on this one, so it looks like that's the pattern. Maybe, in the spring when the new growth starts, I may get two, and then I'll have, a progression. But at the moment, coming into bloom soon should be interesting. So that'll be the first progress report on this, is let's have a look at the first time bloomer. So that's that one. This is my Dendrobium Lodi Jessie, and as part of putting my Dendrobium talk together, I've actually got a stored away clip of this plant just as we were going into winter, so at the point where I was starting the rest period. It's now well into its rest period. It's dropped quite a few leaves. It will continue dropping leaves throughout the winter. You have to bear in mind on this plant, nearly everything you're looking at is a new growth. Here, 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 and here. Here, here. So a hell of a lot of new growths in the last growing season. Well pleased. It did actually bloom early this year, and I expect it to bloom again come the late winter, early spring. I think it bloomed on this cane, yes, and this cane. So hopefully we can get a pretty good blooming on this one, but it's in its rest period at the moment, so no feed, and it gets a trickle of water, not all over the mossy part, but more on the extremities where there's some bare roots. So it just gets a trickle every now and again. And I'm watching those canes like a hawk. If they start to desiccate, it'll get a little more water. But at the moment I'm looking at watering it, not necessarily watering it, but I'm looking at watering it about once a fortnight. And if it looks like the canes are starting to shrivel, it'll get some water. If they're not, it gets left. So quite dry at the moment, but not bone dry for 3 flipping months. I don't do that. Anyway, that's one of the true winter resters that I've got. Now, Dendrobium senile is in here by popular request, and it was going in anyway. So I added my weight to the popular request, if you know what I mean. Now, this was on my list of a proper dry winter rest, but I'm taking it off that list and putting it in a special little list called semi-winter rest. And the reasons are, let's put it down this way, I might be able to do. We have a new growth here, yeah? We've got another one here. We've got another one down in there, yeah? And another one lurking somewhere. Where is it? Oh, it's this branch here. This one, that's pushed on quite a bit, so it didn't even look like a new growth. So this is producing new growths in the winter. So if I rest it, I'll lose them. You know, they'll either drain the canes, trying to grow with no feed and water, or I'll just lose them completely and they'll just stop growing and wilt. Now, as far as its progression is concerned, most of the canes you're looking at are this season's growth. It's grown incredibly well. It's not a single plant. I think there's 3 plants on there, 3 separate pieces basically. This piece over here is the largest piece. And these canes over here, that now really do look like tarantula legs, have recently lost their leaves. Yeah? So these are the canes I would look to bloom, definitely. But given what it did last year, it went into winter, and come the spring, early this year, it bloomed on canes with leaves on. It also bloomed on this one that didn't have any leaves on. So it produced some blooms earlier this year. So we'll see what it does. I'll be interested to see which canes actually produce buds, and whether we actually get, pretty certain on these over to the left, and possibly some with leaves on. It may drop some more leaves through the winter, but given what's left now, I mean, there's a tiny little cane there with a leaf that's going to drop, but it's only got 1 leaf. That's one of the really old bits that were on the original plant. It's not really growing on the maturer canes anymore. They've all got their terminal leaves, but it's producing new growths. So it's in a halfway house. It is finished maturing this season's growths, but it's now pushing up some new ones which shouldn't really appear until spring. But the fact that they're coming up now, this gets a little more water and a bit of feed, but nowhere near as often as like a normal plant going through the winter, like an oncidium or something. So it's getting half a rest. That's the only way I can describe it. But it'll be interesting to see if and from where it does decide to bloom. Sort of, I think this is more of a early spring bloomer rather than a late winter bloomer. So it's probably March into April time. But yeah, lovely little plant. I'm well pleased with its growth this year. And let's just hope it keeps going. Bigger and bolder and all that sort of stuff. That's that one. Now this is Dendrobium tetragonum, variety giganteum. But it may be an alba form because there's not a hint of colours that there should be on these particular blooms. There should be some reds, should be some spotty blotchy patterning near the base of the sepals. There should be some coloration on the lip, so it may be an alba form. I would have preferred the colours, but looking on the internet, the coloration on this particular plant is infinitely variable. It really is, from very pale to quite dark to masses of coloration markings to very few, so it is quite variable. And bearing in mind that's its first set of blooms, we'll see what happens you know, as it goes on, but it's potentially a perpetual bloomer, so it's one of those where it can rebloom from existing spikes. So don't cut the spikes, basically. Nice progression on this plant. Basically, this has gone from a seedling. You can see the tiny little pseudobulbs at the start of the plant's life. And then gradually the pseudobulbs have progressed upwards, and then suddenly put quite a spurt on for the latest pseudobulb, which is the one that's currently in bloom. So obviously that is its first blooming size pseudobulb. So in theory, all new growth from now on should be blooming size. Yeah, nice little plant. Australian, Queensland sort of area, I believe. But yes, northeast Australian plant. And lovely shape to the blooms. I'm well pleased with the blooms, but they would have had that added spectacle if it had had the red patterning near the base of the sepals and on the lip. Or, quite honestly, the patterning's on the wings of the lip. if you see what I mean by saying wings of the lip, the bits either side of the bit that looks like a lip. Anyway, it's a nice little plant. I've grown it on, and this is its first time blooming, so well pleased with that. It's a drier in winter type plant, so no real rest as such, but where it comes from, it would get a lot less rain through the winter, so comes into that category. Like most orchids that come from tropical regions, they all get less rain in the winter, quite honestly. So that's that one. This is Dendrobium Hibiki, by very popular request. I think it's purely based on the fact that the blooms just lasted an absolute age through the summer and into late summer. So yeah, I agree. I mean, it's an interesting plant. Relatively new acquisition for me anyway. I think I got it at the beginning of this year. Most people who grow this grow it potted, and the canes do grow upright. I decided I'd like to try it mounted. At the time I was running out of shelf space and it looked like it could grow into quite a bit of a monster, so I thought, right, if we turn it upside down and see what it does. Well, most of the canes that got hung upside down had already reached their terminal leaf. So obviously they weren't going to grow any more to have the opportunity to turn up the right way or curl outwards. But nonetheless, they have turned quite a few of their leaves towards the light. So they now photosynthesize a bit better than if they were upside down. The things we'll be watching on this plant are the new growths. Now this one pushed out a while ago and is pushing out at a hell of a rate of knots. So that's the most advanced new growth. However, it is hotly followed up by, down on my knees for you lot, things I do. Right, what we've got is buried right in there is a new growth in the shadows, so right at the back of the plant. That will come out here, yeah? It's got one pushing straight out here. Both of those are quite small. And then the two you can see better are this one that's going to go skywards and this one that will probably do that, the same as this one did. So once these canes have matured, we will have a plant that goes probably equally as tall as it does coming downwards. This can rebloom on older canes. Now these short stubby canes up here are where most of the blooms were. Yeah, but it did bloom here, yeah, and that was on a leaved cane. So the theory is the next lot of blooms are going to be on this cane, probably some more on that one, this one, and the one round the back. And they're much bigger canes, so the potential for more blooms is there. But these do tend to bloom nearer the base of the canes than nearer the top. Although if you look at this cane, there's still potential for this to bloom back up there or even farther down. And I haven't had it long enough to say definitively where the blooms are going to come out. But I would suggest these stubby old little things like that aren't going to bloom again. They've done their thing and they did it very well. Yeah? So, you know, they can be just left to sort of become an older part of the plant and one day they can be taken off to tidy it up, but not yet. The other thing this plant's done, since it got mounted, because it didn't have brilliant roots when I mounted it, is boy has it done some roots. They've come all out the back of the plant and spread all over the mount, right out to the edges, stuck out the top of the moss, heading off into the, you know, into all areas basically, including some aerial ones hanging down. So it's now got quite an extensive root system that it didn't have when I first got it. So I'm well pleased with the growth on that one. And yeah, it'll be interesting to watch those new growths. This one's heading off, you know, this one is still growing, so it's nowhere near full size yet. And in theory, the canes that I've already got are not as big as they can get. They're as big as these canes are going to get because they finish growing. Terminal leaf and all that. But you can see that one's still growing at the moment. Lovely, good shape, good colour, good fat cane. And hopefully the other 4 following on behind will be equally as good. Actually there's 5, I've just seen another one. The one that I put my finger on that's now near the bottom of the shot between 2 canes. The one off to the left sticking upwards. The 2 larger ones. And then right in underneath there is another one. So we have the large new growth and 5 others. So 6 new growths to progress on that one. That'll be fun to watch and see when it blooms next time round. If it blooms to pattern, we should be looking at sort of late spring probably, or into the summer. Seems to be more of a summer to autumn bloomer, but it may be early next year. We'll wait and see. But I'm very pleased with the plant. See, now I chose, there were lots of these and they were all in bloom except this one, and this was the best plant, so I chose this one. And everybody else went home with a not such good plant, but it had blooms on. I'm pleased I chose this one because the blooms came later. Boy did they come later, and boy were they good. Really good performing plant so far, as long as it does it again next year. Now I'm standing well back at the moment to be able to get the whole plant in. But out of my what I call long cane, totally deciduous dendrobiums, this is the one that's least likely to catch up with the likes of anosmum as far as cane length is concerned. But don't bank on it. You have to bear in mind this was a kiki, and that bare cane to the left is the kiki that I was given by Alberto. So that single cane was a kiki, and it bloomed. I was over the moon. I didn't expect that, I must admit. Now, not long after I got it, it attempted to put up this new growth, which basically aborted. It grew so far and then stopped. But after that, it then produced a proper, what I would call a proper new growth, and a good associated root system that's gone right out around the mount. So it's now got a pretty well established root system, and this is this season's cane. It's starting to show signs of losing its leaves. During the winter, the chances are it will lose most, if not all, of its leaves on that cane. And then this is the cane that should bloom. I doubt if we'll get any blooms on that little stubby one. We might do. It might manage to push up some. And even though this cane has bloomed, this particular plant tends to bloom around there on the length of the cane. Not right at the ends and not right at the beginning, sort of the middle third area. But that doesn't mean to say it might go back a node or two and try again, or move on a node or two and try again. So there could be an odd bloom on that bare cane. But if it's going to bloom well, it'll be on this season's growth once that growth has had the appropriate winter rest. This is a full winter rester. This hasn't had any feed for some time, and it only gets the trickle of water if I see any signs of this starting to desiccate, which so far it isn't doing. So this has had next to no water for some time now, but it will get some if it needs it. So that's Dendrobium aphyllum, an original kiki from Alberto in sunny Pizza, who is now Alberto of not so sunny London, working at Kew Gardens. So anyway, that's the representative of the what I call long cane, totally deciduous dendrobiums that need a proper winter rest. Nice short title for you. Okay, that's the end of part 2. The selected few Dendrobiums that we will keep our eye on as time progresses. So this is like the benchmark video, what they are like going into winter, and then we'll probably revisit them as they're coming out the other end of winter. Sounds like a good idea to me. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time.